People were asking about the Korban Todah, the Thanksgiving offering. It's mentioned in Parashat Tzav. Now, Rashi and the Rambam have very different views about what the Korban Todah was. People who who read Rashi on last week's Parashat would see that according to Rashi, the Korban Todah goes hand in hand with the sages' enactment to recite what's called Birkato Gomel, the blessing of deliverance. It says Arba'at Tzrichim Lehodot. There's a psalm in Tehillim, and it describes the four people: those who were laid up in bed from their illness, those lost in the desert, those stuck traveling at sea, storm-tossed ships, and those who are imprisoned. And when they are saved by God, the prisoner is let free. Those who are on the storm-tossed ship at sea make it back to dry land. Those lost in the desert make it back to civilization. Those who are ill finally get out of bed and they've recovered. So they are to recite the Birkat Gomel, and they're also supposed to, according to Rashi. And I think actually it would be good if we read exactly what Rashi says over here. I'll put it on the screen once again, so you can see how Rashi understands. This is, by the way many people assume is the halacha because Rashi said so. I found sources, for example, Das Mikra assumes like Rashi, as does Rabbi Makover in his commentary in his encyclopedia Torah Korbonot. So tell me if you can see this. You get Rashi on Vayikra over there. Bring two copies so we can see it over here. Here it says, Imal Todah Yakrivenu. There's the what we call peace offerings because that's related to the word shlamim. Of late, I've been translating it more like feast offerings. I think that's a better translation. It says Imal Todah Yakrivenu. If he's bringing his feast offering because he wants to give thanks to God. Rashi says Im al Davar Hoda'al Nes Shana Salo. If he is bringing it for the matter of giving thanks for a miracle that was done to him. For example, Kagon, Yoredei Hayam V'Olchei Midbarioth, those who go take voyages in the sea, Yoredei, why are they going down into Lev Yam means they're not staying along the coast or staying on a river, they're actually going out to the sea, well off miles from land. And Holchei Midbarioth, those who traverse the deserts, or actually more like the wilderness, Chavushei, Beit HaSurim, those imprisoned, V'Choleh Shenit Rapeh, and one who was ill, who recovered. Shehein tzrichim lehodot. They have to thank God. Shekatuv bahen, because it says about them in the psalm I mentioned, Psalm 107. Yodu Lashem chasto. Thank God for His kindness, or again, that's what it means here. V'niflothal levnei adam, and His wonders to in front of children of men, means in front of people. We use bechuz of Todah, and then continues afterwards, and they shall slaughter sacrifices of thanksgiving, reference to the Thanksgiving offering. Imal chat me'ele nadar. So if upon one of these he made a neder, shlamim alalu shalmei todah. So if he had a reason to do this, so he has it's called a shalmei todah. And utunot lechem. And what makes it different than a regular feast offering is that it requires bread. Mura binyan, which you're going to see now. It's going to mention a lot of bread brought with it, as we saw when we studied earlier. He only has one day and one night to eat all of it, as beaten on that very day. Rashi continues over here. Vim neder onudava. The pasuk continues referring to feast offerings that are brought because he made a promise or as a donation. We said before there's a difference between these two. Neder and Devat. It depends. Is the animal itself what he promised to bring? This animal or this type of Korbon? In which case, if for whatever reason this animal is struck by lightning, stolen, gone. So it's not his responsibility to make up the Korbon because he promised to bring that animal, it's gone. Whereas if he had the nature of his solemn vow was to bring a particular sacrifice to God, and he lost the animal that he is intending, so he has to make it up because he still has that obligation they took upon himself. He says here, Neder Nava means Shalo Hevia al Hoda Ashal Nes, Enatun Alechem. If he volunteered to take this offering, Neder and Nava are types of voluntary offerings that, because it's not a Thanksgiving offering for a miracle, so it doesn't require bread. It's an ordinary shlamim. Shlamim with a lot of bread. So that's called an ordinary shlamim. And he gets 2 days to eat it now. unlike the Thanksgiving offering, which is a shlamim that comes with bread. So Rashi here has made a distinction. Rashi is basically saying that if a person was in these circumstances that require also gomel, a gomel is mentioned in, I think we saw this before, page 54 in the tractate Brachot. So he's supposed to find a minyan of men and recite this blessing, and two of them should be chachamim at least. And it's also proper that he bring a shlamim. And we call that shlamim the Korbon Todah. Sometimes he just brings a shlamim for whatever reason, the feast offering. I guess he wants to celebrate something else, the birth of his daughter, let's say, earlier this week on a Tuesday. So he has over here a chance to voluntarily bring an offering. So the shlamim over here is voluntary, and the one described here, the Todah brand of the shlamim, is technically not voluntary. That's Rashi's opinion. The Rambam has it sort of disconnected. In the laws of Brachot, the Rambam describes how Birkat HaGomel is recited, and he says it's these four people. The argument is limited to these four people, or are they just examples of anybody analogous to them? We technically hold that people in similar situations, these are just the four paradigms, they're also supposed to thank God officially by reciting his blessing. Usually it's in conjunction with the Torah reading. Women who have recently given birth, they recover. They're stuck in bed for a while, so they recover. Also, they should find the minyan. They recite it. So, however it is, the woman finds the minyan. Sometimes at the circumcision of her son, if it's not a son, if it's a girl born on, let's say, a Tuesday in the middle of the week, so she'll eventually go to the synagogue, find the minyan, and from the women's section recite this blessing. Sometimes that works. And as for the Korbon Todah, the Rambam says explicitly, and we've seen this before. I'll read the exact line in Maaseh Korbanot. The Rambam doesn't connect the two. Okay? He says it's not really its obligation. It's not connected to Birkat HaGomel. Even I'll read the exact line over here. See, I'm using the printed copy. It's in the first chapter. I think the fifth halach over here. Here it says. See, they renumbered it here. I'm using the Makbili. I'm used to too much of the Korean here. It says Korbanotei Yachid Hena B'chor V'Maser V'Pesach V'Chagiga V'Yashlamim. So he says the individuals' sacrifices, as opposed to the community sacrifices, are the firstborn, the tithe, the Pesach, which we're getting ready for, Chagiga, the festival offering, with Shlamim, which is a shlamim. It's a type of feast offering. The Hariyah, and the appearance offering. When a person appears on pilgrimage before God, he has to bring a burnt offering. That's a type of burnt offering with Korban Hager, and the sacrifice that a convert brings as part of his conversion process. Vihu olam min abemo, which should be a burnt offering that's an animal, not a meal offering and not a bird. O shnei bnei yonah, or a pair of turtle doves. O shnei turim, or two pigeons. Ushnei olah, and both of those are to be a burnt offering. O shtei beimot achat olah achat shlamim, or two animals, one a burnt offering, one a feast offering. And also there's a person who can just take upon himself a neder and a dava. Like I said, there's a voluntary offering. It could be a shlamim also. And he says, Ushlamim abayim lechem heim nikrim todah. So the shlamim that come with bread, that's called a todah. Rambam continues over here. He says, Shamei Yachid, this now in the 9th chapter, the 5th halach, he says, Shamei Yachid shlosha minim. The feast offering offered by an individual, 3 types. Hachad, first, hu abash shlamim below lechem. Feast offering without bread. Kegon shamei chagiga v'simcha, which is for example, the type of the festival offering and the rejoicing offering. What is that? He first has to bring a chagiga because he's going on pilgrimage, he needs something to eat, and simcha is that there's more meat to go around. V'zeu anikra shlamim. That's just plain old shlamim without any modifier. The second type is the feast offering that is offered with bread, b'neder onidava. Once again, voluntary. Neder, like we said, a person promises to bring a certain type of korban. Nedava means this animal. But either way, both are voluntary. V'zeu anikra todah. And this is what we call Thanksgiving offering. And that bread is called Thanksgiving bread, or bread of the Thanksgiving. And the third type is shlamim shemakriv nazir biyom belov, the feast offering that a nazir brings at the end of his term of his Nazirite vow. So you see here the Rambam is very clear that the shlamim that comes with bread, that's called a todah, and it is always what? It is always voluntary. And the Rambam doesn't connect it like Rashi does to the people who are in this particular situation, which basically means that Rashi's typical case of a person who brings a Korban Todah is because he was in danger and he was saved by God from that danger. Whereas, according to the Rambam, a person who brings a Korban Todah was not necessarily one who was in danger. One who was in danger says Birkat Gomel. Someone who just wants to thank God. Perhaps he was in danger, but even those who just have so much to thank God for example, high school graduation, their wedding, birth of a grandchild, birth of their daughter earlier in the week, whatever it may be, especially that when a person has a son born, so he has a lot of Sudot Mitzvah lined up for him. He has his Shalom Zacher, and then he has the bris, and if it's a firstborn, he'll have a pidyon ben. So there's a lot of parties coming his way. But for the birth of a girl, there's not much that's officially dictated. Nowadays, they have a custom. They've actually scared people, and there's a new superstition going around that if a person doesn't make some sort of kiddush or something like that on the birth of his daughter, he's going to relegate her to spinsterhood. So he better make a kiddush or something quickly. So that's what people used to do. I don't think they had the superstition, but for that which there is no prescribed party, so it would be proper to bring a korban todah. And we'll leave it at that. That's just the difference between Rashi and Rambam, how they understand the necessity of bringing a korban todah from last week's parsha.